Hello students, welcome to my subject Literary Criticism 2. Our course code is English 332 and it's our lecture number 15. In the previous lectures we talked about T.S. Eliot, his poetic concepts, his criticism, his theory of impersonality, his essayist tradition in individual talent, and we also discussed about T.S. Eliot as a critic. Let's talk about T.S. Eliot's theory of objective correlative. With the publication in 1922 of his poem The Wasteland, Eliot won an international reputation. The Wasteland expresses with great power the disenchantment, disillusionment, and disgust of the period after World War I. In a series of vignettes loosely linked by the legend of the search for the Grail, it portrays a sterile world of panicky fears and barren lusts, and of human beings waiting for some sign or promise of redemption. The poem's style is highly complex, erudite, and elusive, and the poet provided notes and references to explain the work's many quotations and allusions. This scholarly supplement distracted some readers and critics from perceiving the true originality of the poem, which lay rather in its rendering of the universal human predicament of men desiring salvation, and in its manipulation of language, than in its range of literary references. In his early poems, Eliot had shown himself to be a master of the poetic phrase. The Wasteland showed him to be, in addition, a metrist of great virtuosity, capable of astonishing modulations ranging from the sublime to the conversational. The outlines are as what the thunder said, as here is no water, but only rock, rock and no water in the sandy road, the road wending above among the mountains which are mountains of rock without water. The outlines first about the poet, then his critical concepts, theory of objective correlative, Hamlet and his problems, poetic process, and remarks. T.S. Eliot, born in September 1888, died in January 1965, was American-born British poet, essayist, literary critic, dramatist, publisher, and editor. Eliot is one of the greatest literary critics of England from the point of view of his critical writings. His 500 essays, occasionally published as reviews and articles, had a far-reaching influence on literary criticism in the country. His criticism was revolutionary, which inverted the critical tradition of the whole English-speaking work. Objective correlative. Eliot said that the poet critic must write programmatic criticism. That is, criticism that expresses the poet's own interests as a poet, quite different from historical scholarship, which stops at placing the poet in his background. Consciously intended and not, Eliot's criticism created an atmosphere in which his own poetry could be better understood and appreciated than if it had to appear in a literary milieu dominated by the standards of the preceding age. In the essay Tradition and the Individual Talent, appearing in his first critical volume, The Sacred Wood, in 1920, Eliot asserts that tradition as used by the poet is not a mere repetition of the work of the immediate past. Novelty is better than repetition, he said. Rather, it comprises the whole of European literature from Homer to the present. The poet writing in English may therefore make his own tradition by using materials from any past period in any language. This point of view is programmatic in the sense that it disposes the reader to accept the revolutionary novelty of Eliot's polyglot quotations and serious parodies of other poets' styles in the West Land. Also, in The Sacred Wood, Hamlet and His Problem sets forth Eliot's theory of the objective correlative. The only way of expressing emotion in the form of art is by finding an objective correlative. In other words, like a set of objects, events, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula for that particular emotion, such that when the external facts which must terminate in sensory experience are given, the emotion is immediately evoked. Eliot used the phrase objective correlative in the context of his own impersonal theory of poetry. It thus had an immense influence toward correcting the vagueness of late Victorian rhetoric by insisting on a correspondence of word and object. Two other essays, first published the year after The Sacred Wood, almost complete the Eliot critical canon. The Metaphysical Poets and Andrew Marvell, published in Selected Essays in 1917-32. In these essays, he effects a new historical perspective on the hierarchy of English poetry, putting at the top Donne and other metaphysical poets of the 17th century and lowering poets of the 18th and 19th centuries. Eliot's second famous phrase appears here: dissociation of sensibility, invented to explain the change that came over English poetry after Donne and Andrew Marvell. This change seems to him to consist in a loss of the union of thought and feeling. The phrase has been attacked, yet the historical fact that gave rise to it cannot be denied, and with the poetry of Eliot and Pound, it had a strong influence in reviving interest in certain 17th century poets. The theory of the objective correlative is one of the most important critical concepts of T.S. Eliot. It exerted a tremendous influence on the critical temper of 20th century. In the concept of the objective correlative, Eliot's doctrine of poetic impersonality finds its most classic formulation. The first or programmatic phrase of Eliot's criticism ended with the use of poetry and the use of criticism in 1933. His Charles Eliot Norton lecture at Harvard School shortly before this, his interest had broadened into theology and sociology. 3 short books or long essays were the result: The Thoughts After Lambeth in 1931, The Idea of a Christian Society in 1939, and Notes Towards the Definition of Culture in 1948. These book essays, along with his Dante 1929 and indubitable masterpiece, broadened the base of literature into theology and philosophy. Whether a work is poetry must be decided by literary standards. Whether it is great poetry must be decided by standards higher than the literary. His criticism and poetry are so interwoven that it is difficult to discuss them separately. Eliot himself defines objective correlative as a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula for the poet's emotion, so that when the external facts are given, the emotion is at once evoked. And according to him, the poet cannot communicate his emotions directly to the readers. He has to find some object suggestive of it, and only then he can evoke the same emotion in his readers. So this objective correlative is a set of object, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula of that particular emotion, such that when the external facts which must terminate in sensory experience are given, the emotion is immediately evoked. And this is like if we compare Eliot's ideas to Aristotle, it is of the opinion that it is not the business of the poet to say but to show, not to present but to represent. In other words, like Eliot's concept of the objective correlative is based on the notion that it is not the business of the poet to present his emotions directly, but rather to represent them indirectly through the objective correlative, which become the formula for the poet's original emotions. One of the reasons why Eliot admires Dante's poetry is that Dante's was a visual imagination, because he attempted to make us see what he saw. This is what a poet must do according to T.S. Eliot, because he did not lose his grasp over the objective correlative. And if writers or poets or playwrights want to create an emotional reaction in the audience, they must find a combination of images, objects, or description evoking the appropriate emotion. The source of the emotional reaction isn't in one particular object, one particular image, or one particular word. Instead, like the emotion originates in the combination of these phenomena when they appear together. Now, from the essay Hamlet in His Problems, the only way of expressing emotion in the form of art, objective correlative. It is a set of object, a situation, chain of events which shall be the formula of that particular emotion. An emotional reaction doesn't get stimulated from one particular object, image, or word. It originates in the combination of these when they appear together. Is what objective correlative does. It acts as a medium for the poet to transmit his emotions to the reader in an objective way. This is what actually objective correlative means. According to T.S. Eliot, it is the work of art as an artifact in organic whole. And successful instance of objective correlative is the example from Macbeth, sleepwalking in scene in Macbeth. Hamlet, an artistic failure, lacks objective correlative. He criticized sleepwalking scene in Macbeth, which has been taken from Shakespeare's drama Macbeth. His other critical concepts, like Eliot devised numerous critical concepts that gained wide popularity and has a broad influence on criticism. For example, objective correlative, dissociation of sensibility, unification of sensibility are few of Eliot's works hotly debated by critics. His comments on the nature of poetic drama and the relation between poetry and drama have done much to bring about a revival of poetic drama in the modern age. Poetic drama in the modern age, even if he had written no poetry, he would have made his mark as a distinguished and subtle, shrewd critic. The nature of poetic process. Eliot's views on the nature of poetic process are equally revolutionary, as his criticism and poetry are so interwoven that it is difficult to discuss them separately. According to him, poetry is not inspiration, it is organization. In his essay, Tradition and Individual Talent, the poet's mind is like a vessel in which are stored numerous feelings, emotions, and experiences. The poetic process fuses these distinct experiences and emotions into new wholes. And it is in his most famous critical essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent, he argues that art must be understood not in a vacuum but in the context of previous pieces of art. Eliot himself implied this concept on many of his work, especially on his long poem, The Waste Land. If writers, the concluding remarks on T.S. Eliot's theory of objective correlative, if writers or poets or playwrights want to create an emotional reaction in the audience, they must find a combination of images, objects, or description evoking the appropriate emotion. The source of the emotional reaction isn't in one particular object, one particular image, or one particular word. Instead, the emotion originates actually in the combination of these phenomena when they appear together. And this is the real sense of objective correlative, where his own impersonal theory of poetry has been used in the same context. It had an immense influence toward correcting the vagueness of late Victorian rhetoric by insisting on correspondence of word and object. And this is The only way of expressing emotion in the form of art is by finding an objective correlative. In other words, a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events which shall be the formula for that particular emotion, such that when the external facts which must terminate in sensory experience are given, the emotion is immediately evoked. Thank you very much and good luck. I hope you got the point.